I do not want to divulge publicly what we've been able to do, but there was one company in the portfolio, very strong founder, but they had a business model where they were saying, I need to assess every new onboarding customer that they were bringing in support of their own retail customers, for example. And the time and effort that they were devoting, and told us that the business model was not going to be scalable. And we provided some feedback, and they changed the business model slightly, and now it is one of the strongest companies in our portfolio.
Today we discuss Turbostart's take on maintaining investor-investee relationship. So Venkat, before we begin with the questions, do you want to share anything?
Hi, this is Venkat. I'm the global CEO for the Turbostart group. So today's topic, you use the word investor and investee. I don't like the terms, especially in the context of Turbostart. Let me explain why. We look at a startup founder or companies where we have invested in as true partners in a journey. So rather than looking at investor and investee, I would love to see them as partners in their journeys. That's how I would like to see.
So, in your experience, what are the key elements in establishing trust and transparency between investors and startups?
So, going back to what I just said about true partners, so this is like a marriage. It is like any true partnership has to be built on trust, and that is something that is earned. It is one thing, a lot of people use the term partnership and so on and so forth, but do you really mean it? Just as in any relationship, including a marriage, you have to constantly work at it, you have to nurture it, and earn the right to call yourself a true partner. And Turbostart's model, the way we operate, is basically based on that kind of building over a time, establishing credibility, coming through, watching their back, being there for them at the right time, for example. And the only answer is it's over a period of time. And any new partners coming along, they can talk to our existing set of partners, i.e. the founders in our portfolio company, and they should be able to give some idea about how we work with them.
How does Turbostart advise startups to communicate progress, challenges, and pivots to investors? Are there any best practices that you have observed?
So just like any fund, we have obligations and responsibility to provide information about us and our portfolio performance back to our investors, for example. So that means at least once a quarter, we are required to provide that information. But the way we like to operate is, any investor of ours should be able to come in and ask for information or able to access that information, when we should be able to provide the most up-to-date current information to the extent possible, which means we are reliant on our entrepreneurs in the portfolio to providing us that necessary information at least once a quarter. That is a minimum. But the way we engage our portfolio companies as true partners means we are constantly interacting with them, and the communication is not like one way but both directional. And we want to establish a culture where they are willing to provide the information above and beyond what is necessary for our own purpose, but much more importantly for their needs. For example, if they are struggling with something and they want a shoulder to lean on or ask for some support, they should be welcome to come. So for me, information is a constant flow bidirectionally, and in support of some regulatory and other obligations, but much more importantly for the benefit of the startup itself. That's how I see it.
So since you yourself have been an entrepreneur who has raised funds, are there any practices that have worked out well for you?
So although we are partners, the way I put it, there's a line I draw between providing advice and guidance versus, going into the operational realm of a startup, for example. Founders own the company. Ultimately, it is their responsibility, it is their company, they should be making the final decision. We can only provide inputs and guidance, for example, and as long as we respect the boundary, the relationship is healthy. So as an entrepreneur, I made sure that I was like briefing, updating my board, including the investors, to the extent possible. But I really valued my autonomy. I valued how I ran my own company, and I did not want even the best of well-wishers intruding into my space. So that perspective, that experience has prepared me in the current phase where I am respectful of the boundaries and I don't go and intrude into their space and their work. So that's one thing I would like to call out, yes.
How does Turbostart recommend startups navigate tough times or unexpected roadblocks without jeopardizing the trust and understanding with their investors?
A startup journey is very hard, very hard, and especially if you are a founder CEO, it's a very lonely place. There are things that are happening which you may not be able to confide in your own team. You may not be able to confide in anybody outside because these are very sensitive, you're making hard decisions. And in such a lonely place, one opportunity is, okay, how do they get guidance? Can we create an environment where they feel a level of trust and confidence to confide in? And ideally, I would like to position myself as somebody who is a true well-wisher and not seen as an investor perspective. They should not feel, okay, I need to hide this information or sugarcoat this information because I don't know how the investor is going to react. And for me, the way at least I approach my partners here is empathy. I've been in their shoes. I've gone through the hard times. I can relate to that. And at least at this stage in my life, I see myself more on the side of the entrepreneurs, although I do have an obligation as an investor to make sure that everything is done right. I think if we are able to lend hand and support the entrepreneurs, in turn that helps the company, which in turn helps our own fund and thus our own stakeholders, which are the investors. So I see this as like a open, trusting environment where it benefits all stakeholders, including the startup founders.
How does Turbostart encourage a culture of constructive feedback between investors and startups? Can you share instances where feedback has led to positive outcomes?
So on a regular basis, we spend some time talking not only the day-to-day stuff, but strategic direction. How is the market changing? How is the new competition? Has any regulatory announcement made that has potential implications for the company, and so on and so forth. And probably every 6 months or something, we do some kind of a workshopping exercise going into various aspects. We go back and see what can be done in terms of the business model. So obviously, again, I am very respectful. It is the founders, it is their company, but we do this in-depth look back at what happened and is there a need for like tweaking the business and so on and so forth. I do not want to divulge publicly what we've been able to do, but there was one company in the portfolio, very strong founder, but they had a business model where they were saying, I need to assess every new onboarding customer that they were bringing in support of their own retail customers, for example. And the time and effort that they were devoting, and told us that the business model was not going to be scalable. And we provided some feedback and they changed the business model slightly, and now it is one of the strongest companies in our portfolio. I don't want to divulge names, but we feel good about at least opening the founders' eyes to a new possibility where they should be able to scale very rapidly, and they are.
How does Turbostart approach evaluating the success of an investee beyond just the numbers? Are there tangible factors that Turbostart values?
Sure. We all want to feel good about something. Even when I was a founder, it was like going beyond the numbers. Okay, is the startup that I have, is it having an impact in people's lives? And that is a critical factor. So when we look at any potential investment opportunities and when we work with the portfolio companies, above the numbers, revenues and margins, profitability, etc., how big impact it is having. And there are like overarching themes: build in India, create value for our own stakeholders, which is our investors, but create value for partners, create value for the company's customers and so on. But are you making an impact in the ecosystem? How much of employment you are creating, for example? Are you making a lives in your employees, the startups employees, for example? Build in India for the globe. Are you making a dent in that? And so a variety of such factors come in, not to mention things around sustainability, climate, and so on and so forth. Not that we have a sectoral thesis on any of these things, but I want to see our investments making a true impact. And I'm glad to say at least a good chunk of them do have non-financial impact, and we are very pleased to see all that. Yes, thank you.
In conclusion of this podcast episode, do you have any message for young entrepreneurs?
Oh, this is like an ideal job, personally speaking, for me. Spending time with young entrepreneurs is something, at least I see that as like giving back at this stage in my life. And it is a privilege to be working with young, energetic entrepreneurs. Yes.